Okay, I'd like to call a regular meeting of the Buckhannon City Council to order. Ask that you join me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. We'll respect the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board reports, Michael Doss is on vacation. Mitch, I think Scott's going to report for Chief Tacey.
Chief Tacey has asked me to fill in for him this evening. He is absolutely exhausted. One, from having no electricity in his home, like so many other people in Upshur County, and the other one is we have been serving as a unofficial relief center for the community during the power outages, etc. We've had a core group of volunteers at the station from 6 in the morning till about 10 every night. And this evening, Mitch and his wife are cooking dinner for those volunteers. And I would direct council to the first insert in their package, and it deals with the physical fitness criteria, or a new physical fitness criteria that has been proposed and passed by the Fire Civil Service Commission, and seeking council's approval on this. Very briefly, the different exercises and the different physical requirements have been modified to reflect more of what a firefighter would actually encounter in the line of service. They put quite a bit of effort into this, and it is ready to be passed, and I would recommend that the council pass that affirmatively. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that.
Mitch, as a reminder, Mitch said that he was working on this, and I think gave us a little bit of an overview, at least gave me an overview on it. Is there any question on this?
Is this based on the state or federal regulations according to what training?
It's more national.
National?
Right. Before, the physical fitness criteria was so many push-ups, so many sit-ups, and so much time to run a mile and a half. This is actually hauling hose, being on a stair mill, dragging a rescue dummy of a certain weight, and doing those kinds of activities more in line with what a firefighter would actually do.
How often are you retested, Scott?
Civil service, you test when you enter the fire civil service, and at the present time there's no requirement for an annual. It's more department directed more than anything else, but there's no national or civil service criteria to retest.
Yeah, as a point, this is a pre-employment physical. That's what we're talking about.
Correct.
Are there guidelines or anything for volunteers? Is this volunteers, or is this for
paid staff?
Paid staff.
Paid staff only.
And as paid staff get older and there's no guidelines as to what they must do as far as physical capabilities?
Correct.
So are they noted if they're unable to perform certain things by the chief maybe, or somebody in the department,
Done case by case.
Case by case.
And it's a chief's call, a decision of when a firefighter is not capable of performing.
more for the benefit and health of the firefighter and his co-workers too. Okay.
Scott, are there any national standards as far as being required to take tests every so often, or is that something that's not covered?
There are no national standards. There are guidelines, but no standards. The issue you get into is an imposed level of physical fitness, and if that's going to be a job requirement, then the requirement is to provide physical fitness training. It's a never-ending catch-22 kind of thing. And then when do you implement a program like that? How do you grandfather people into it? It has been tried. The most successful cases are when it's leadership driven within each individual department, whether it's a large city, small city department, or even a totally volunteer organization, the emphasis on physical fitness.
So what's your pleasure? And I guess I'd entertain a motion to approve these physical agility testing for pre-employment as firemen. So moved. Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
And I have one last comment, and I have to say that this is coming more from Councilman Preston as opposed to Chief Tacey, but I will say that I do not follow the social networks. Seldom do I participate in the social networks, but in one social network, the statement was made pretty close to, why don't the firefighters get off their asses and direct traffic during the storm? And that comment does not dignify a response, but I am most thankful to all the hundreds of people who responded on the social network, sort of telling that person or whoever made that comment, helping them correct that along the way. But there were so many volunteers during this entire effort, emergency service volunteers, our city personnel. I personally was trying to reach Jerry and Lowell Smith probably 8:30. This is an hour after the storm hit, to implement stuff going out here on, within our city, and we have a tremendous core of volunteer people and volunteer emergency people and volunteer workers in our city. And for the person that made that comment, I'm not going to comment, but I'll offer that person an invitation to volunteer. And when you do, you will understand why. And your question will be answered. And that's all I have, unless you have comments for the fire department.
Comments, questions? Jay Holland, city engineer.
I'm just going to stand right here since the podium seems to be occupied. An update on the Gateway East Enhancement Project. At this time, we have not received our notice to proceed from the state. It's still going through their environmental review, but they had to postpone that for the last month. They were supposed to have it to me mid-June, but they've had a couple bat surveys come up on a couple projects that they needed to complete, and so it's still in the environmental stage. I met with representatives from District 7 over in Weston regarding the Gateway East project. We actually walked a portion of it, and I don't anticipate any problems when the paperwork will finally be filed. On the water treatment plant and distribution system evaluation, Tom Landis and I are continuing our internal review of the water treatment plant for any upgrades or renovations that may be anticipated before we send out an RFQ to maybe consult an outside engineering firm to help us with that. And then once we're done with the treatment plant evaluation, Kelly Arnold and I will start on the distribution system and look at the tanks and pump stations and all that to see if there's areas that may need to be upgraded or renovated. Going to the big one, the Army National Guard complex, the right-of-ways have been sent out to the 9 property owners as I reported the last meeting. We've received 5 of those back, and we're still in negotiation with 2 of the property owners to finalize the right-of-way and alignment. I anticipate detailed design to begin within the next month as soon as Tom and I finish, and Kelly and I finish on the distribution system and treatment plant. I want to get the detailed design on that started and completed prior to the end of 2012 because it has to be sent to Charleston Bureau for Public Health, and they have a 90-day review period, and I don't want that to be a holdup or anything if we plan on starting our construction early spring of 2013. So I'd like to have the detailed design for Army National Guard water line completed by the end of the year. Anticipated construction date of 2013. That takes me over to Island Avenue. I hadn't forgot about that one, but we're still going to upgrade that existing 4-inch line to 6, not only because it's falling in disrepair, but to provide fire services over in that area with a reliable source of water. As soon as I'm done with Army National Guard, I'm going to start the detailed design on the Island Avenue replacement project. And Upshur County Board of Education, we were lucky 3 weeks ago. Some of you may or may not know, but the Tennerton pump station was running constantly due to a leak that we weren't able to locate. Up to 300, 400 gallons per minute at a time, you know, and if it would run at that rate consistently, it would have been about 500,000 gallons a day that we would have lost. We found out there was a leak at the high school. It was a major leak on one of their 12-inch lines. We found that Monday, 2 weeks ago, and then we spent the Tuesday and Wednesday repairing that. And just wanted to recognize the crews, everybody that helped, you know, not only the city people, personnel, but the contractor and the school board in helping us. And that really resulted in a lot less headaches, especially with what happened Thursday with all the power going out. We completed the repairs the day before, or the 2 days before the storm came on Friday. Mr. Preston had thanked all the volunteers and everything, and I'd just like to send out a couple thank yous. One to Matt Tuttle and the DOH for their timely response on the Route 20 turning lane up at the Main Street intersection. The right turning lane was settling. We found out, you know, once they did their excavation, there was an intact basement that was left there. But in that basement were trees, water heaters, the old steam radiators, pipes, stuff that collapsed and had just settled. Over time, it had finally settled. But, you know, they did a great job putting it back and putting it back with the right materials, and they built it up. And thank you all goes out to Jerry and Lowell in the street department for completing the sidewalk and curb replacement. Because as some of you may or may not know, the contracting is going to begin within the next 2 weeks on the eradication and the pavement overlay of Route 20. I think from the railroad tracks down to the McDonald's area. You know, that's going to start within the next 2 weeks, and that had to be done and repaired before they got started on that project. So thanks to the DOH on that. And of course to Mon Power for their quick responses. You know, it would caught it, you know, everybody I think unexpected, like we had all talked about, but they were able to get our critical infrastructure, our water plants and our wastewater treatment plant, in addition to the lift stations and booster stations, up and running, so we continue to provide those services, water and sanitary sewer services, to not only Buckhannon but Upshur County, and that, I thank you, goes out to those guys. I know there's still residents without power, but to get that infrastructure up and running that was needed was a great, you know, job on their part. I just want to say thanks. That's all I have to report, unless there's any questions.
Question for Jay?
Got a question on Jawbone Park.
Jawbone Park.
My understanding, we're sort of waiting on a FEMA overview before the final grading, and
yes,
goes in there, and we've been trying to encourage that process.
Where we are with that now is FEMA was scheduled to come up next week, next Wednesday or next Thursday, depending on their schedule. That has been put in a state of flux right now. I am on hold. I received an email, but even though Upshur County is one of the heaviest damaged counties in the state, they're still trying to figure out where they're going to send their representative. But the question is, and I know where you're leading with, the reason there's no seeding and mulching at Jawbone Park right now is because there is a question as to whether we can put any additional fill in there to create a 4 or 5 foot embankment or a border around Spring Street, Meadow, and South Florida, you know, to create that amphitheater type seating with a slight grade going towards the theater/stage area. Right now, FEMA regulations do not permit the filling of that area. We are in a floodplain. That just happens to be the lowest point of the major collection system for our stormwater, and right now it's on a hold. We have got a verbal, probably not so much, maybe a no, but they're going to review it, you know, because of the situation, it being a collection point for all of Buckhannon. And I was hoping to have an answer by next Wednesday or Thursday at the latest. Now I don't know when, but I'll keep you updated.
Thanks, Joe.
Anybody else for Jay? Jerry?
Consolidated Public Works Board report. The board approved the request from the classic car event going on the end of July. Approved the parking enforcement officer, Penny Smith, also the helping with the GIS software here in City Hall. Had discussion about advertising for the city gardener position for next year, and approved a request for a headstone, a bench type headstone in Heather Cemetery. Everything else was pretty routine business, And Waste Board this evening, Waste Board approved the hiring of Kurt Norman, pending drug test and his physical and background check. That is to replace one of our employees that moved on. And by moved on, I mean took another job, not moved on. Everything else had some employee issues that we discussed, and everything else in Waste Board was routine. I did not have reports gathered. Kind of busy this week with storm cleanup and picking up all that good stuff out of freezers, so I didn't have time to really get the reports out. I did, however, come in yesterday and get the final billing for the USDA grant together, and I believe the mayor signed that today to send that last request for reimbursement to the USDA. On that note, we've been working, of course, we've kind of got sidetracked on the storm cleanup and picking up brush and branches, and we were working on the walk trail grant, and I may have mentioned that I had talked to Bill Robinson in Charleston, told him we may need a little extra time to complete that project. He said that an email and they could give us a month on it. I have went ahead and requested that since we have got pulled off that project now for this week. I'm scrapped this week and probably part of next before we're actually cleaned up from the storm. We'll move back on that. As Jay had mentioned, we completed the sidewalk up at the corner of Main and Canal. We've also got all the steel cut for the main pavilion at Jawbone, so that'll be coming together this month as well. And that's really all I have unless you have questions.
Question for Jerry?
I have one, Jerry. Is there any plans for working on sidewalks on College Avenue?
Yes, that is part of the Safe Routes to School grant that we have currently, Pam.
Okay.
And again, once we complete the walk trail grant, then that's our next priority, is to move to that and the East Main Street. We'll split our crew up. One will be on East Main Street if we get the notice to proceed, and the other will work Safe Routes, and we'll complete that. But yes, the side, now, I say on College Avenue, we will look towards the side of that Bailey lives on, the side towards Main Street, that part of the site, where it's just a continuation of what we did up at the school, and that's part of that grant as well as part of Florida Street and doing more on Smithfield.
Do you think that will be done before school starts by any chance?
I hope so. You know, our priority is to finish Smithfield and then do that section of College and then the Florida Street side. Now, we do have until, I believe on that grant, the deadline on it is midsummer next year. So I'm hoping that this construction season that we can finish up College Avenue and then do the Florida Street portion, because that's the portion that we actually have to put the brick pavers back in. If it's brick paver now, we've got to put it back in brick paver.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thanks, Jerry. Rich, zoning?
Just a couple of items. Probably the most significant item is there's been a change in policy for the way in which we handle electrical inspections of service entrances. That's the only part that's changed, but the city no longer handles the inspection of the primary entrance into a structure up to the first breaker, the first main cutoff. So anything in that entrance area, what we usually call a new service or a upgrade service, is no longer requires a permit directly from the city. That's handled by a separate inspector now. It's under new regulations as far as the state's concerned. It still needs to be inspected. It's still extremely important. It's just not handled through the city. So that's a change of policy as of last Sunday. If there's any questions on that, we can still help. direct people, it does need to be inspected. Local power company will not hook up a new service or reestablish a service unless it has been inspected. It's just not done by the city, it's done by private inspectors. Another item would be just to remind folks to get their permits. I continually get some calls early in the morning, oh, they're coming this afternoon to do XYZ and I don't have my permit yet. How long does it take? Well, that depends upon what it is, where you're at, whether you're in the flood zone. But please, at least when you come up with the idea, check on the permits, because sometimes it takes a week or two or even more, depending upon what the situation might be. In that regard, one of the things that tends to pop up this time of the year is swimming pools. They can be a very attractive nuisance to young children. City zoning code requires that they, one, be located in the backyard, two, that they be separated from the general public with a 6-foot barrier, either a fence, combination fence and buildings, whatever, that it provides a 6-foot barrier to the outside world for those. We want to make sure our kids are safe, not trying to cool off without supervision. So if there's any questions on those things, just give me a call at City Hall. We'll be glad to talk to you. That's all I have.
Any questions for Rich?
Rich, I know there's several pools that are do not have fences or a 6-foot around town. Several of those, what are we gonna do about that?
I send them letters, give them 15 days to correct the situation. They may or may not I do send those as certified mail with return receipt, so I know they have received the notice. In a few cases, the pool itself may provide a structure that provides that 6-foot. It doesn't have to be a fence, it just has to be a 6-foot barricade. A lot of times, some of these pools have a lattice work or elevated area. But in those cases, they can't have a ladder that sits there all the time. And in one particular case, I know that the pool's there, it's a 6-foot high pool. The pool itself provides a barrier, but in fact, every time I've driven by, the ladder's been in the pool, so it's a pretty easy job for a kid to climb up and over and get into the pool. So it's really the responsibility of the property owner to see those things through.
How deep can they be without a fence?
You know, the folks that wrote the zoning code didn't put anything in about how deep is permitted. I don't know what they were thinking when they did that. As Dave McCullough and I look at each other.
I think it was Mr. Clemens' fault.
No, I think it was Mr. McCauley's fault.
I was thinking it was 12 inches, but
it does not say it. It doesn't have to be a swimming pool. It could be a fish pond, could be anything.
Cold fish pond.
And I'm reminded that you can drown in water that's 2 inches deep.
Right,
so, you know, it's not to be trite about it or anything. But on the other hand, if it's a kiddie pool that you're going to flip over at the end of the day and drain out, that's not an issue. The issue is for the pools that are up 24/7 for a good part of the summer.
Well, like I said, I've noticed there is more and more going up that does not have.
Yeah, every time there's a sale at local business, they seem to pop up. But if you see them and they don't have a fence, let me know. I tour weekly to look for those kinds of things and at least notify.
Anything else? David?
Mayor, I would footnote Mr. Clemens' remarks about pools. Anything under the zoning ordinance, it's a violation. There's a potential citation. And I think it starts out at $100 for a first offense. And, even possibility of jail time, not as though anyone's been cited for that particular provision under our zoning ordinance, but there is that potential for that to occur. The First Community Bank deeds have been completed. Actually, there's a couple little tweaks that I'm doing to those deeds right now, but next week we can close with First Community Bank because I think the 30th day since enactment of the ordinance is Saturday, this coming Saturday. Continue to work on annexations, and particularly working with Mr. Holland and Mr. Doss facilitating the Armory project annexation. Jay could add to my comments, but generally speaking, there's been very good communication and success in acquiring the affected property owners' consents to the annexation as well as the rights-of-way. There are a couple of property owners that are a little more complex because of the nature of what they do on their properties. I'm optimistic that we're going to make good strides and acquire all of those. Jay may have a different take on that. It's been a little frustrating because you get 12 problems that are posed to you by a particular property owner. You think you address all 12 of them, and then you get 3 new problems that they send you in the next email. But what about this? And it's like, well, why didn't you just give us a list of 15 to begin with, and we could have addressed all of your concerns? But I'm optimistic that those will be overcome here in the next week or two. I would remind the council and perhaps more importantly our residents that the noise ordinance becomes effective on Saturday, July 21. So that's sneaking right up on us. Mr. Woltz sent me an email last week, which I kind of lost due to various and sundry things, not the least of which was I didn't have a computer to reply for 3 days, but then I've kind of forgot about it. And Mrs. Caperi also asked about this issue 2 council meetings ago, asking us to consider revisitation of a panhandling ordinance. I'm not changing anything that I've previously advised the council insofar as people have a right to panhandle. It's part of that First Amendment free speech thing. Some municipalities, as you may recall from the packet of stuff that I gave you a while back, have seen their ordinances survive challenges in the courts that provide for within a certain distance of busy intersections or within a certain distance, typically 50 or 100 feet, of an ATM or a bank, things like that, that you can establish zones where panhandling cannot occur. If that's something that the council thinks is prudent for us to pursue, I'm not aware of any ordinances that have been drafted by cities in West Virginia that adopt those distance variables, but it's something we could look into. A lot of those ordinances in other states are out there, so something, food for thought perhaps, as we go forth. I would hate to see us, because of one person that persistently creates a problem, draft an ordinance that is, going to be extremely comprehensive and involved, and especially when that one person probably isn't going to abide by the law anyway. And then what do? I think we'd have to have some conference perhaps with the prosecuting attorney and the various police authorities to determine what happens to that person if there is repeated violations of the limitations or restrictions on panhandling. It's not an easy thing to deal with. I think we all know the situation. I have 2 draft ordinances for you this evening, and I'm calling them draft ordinances because I didn't copy everyone that I needed to copy on Ordinance 366 to have it on the agenda for you to look at this evening. Ordinance 366, I think, is a fully cooked ordinance, ready to go. Ordinance 367 that you also have, not so much. It's more in draft form. But if you would indulge me for just a few minutes to hit the highlights of this proposed draft ordinance 366, and then I would ask the council to look at this thing pretty closely, because I think this is an important and yet progressive step for the city to take relative to the formalization of a city administrator. This is ordinance number 366 of the city of Buckhannon, and ordinance 1, formally establishing the position of city administrator and describing the duties, authority, and requirements associated with the position. 2, merging the duties and authority of the position of city treasurer with the duties and authority of city administrator. 3, amending ordinance number 318 of the city of Buckhannon that is the city's employees administrative ordinance, by redesignating the city administrator and not the city recorder as the administrator of ordinance number 318, and for designating for all purposes the city administrator as the city's human resource manager for all city employees, including the employees of all of the city's utility boards. Whereas the city of Buckhannon, West Virginia is a growing and progressive city, and the City Council recognizes that it is reasonable and necessary to provide for professional oversight and expanded daily management of the city's increasing governmental operations, and whereas the City Council believes that the most effective and cost-efficient manner to realize the aforesaid professional oversight and daily management of the city's governmental operations is through the Council's establishment of a new position and the appointment of an officer to be designated and hereafter referred to as the City Administrator, and whereas Section 26 of the Charter of the City of Buckhannon specifically provides that the Council shall appoint such other officers as may be provided for by ordinance of the City Council, and whereas Section 39 of the city's charter specifically provides that the Council shall have the authority to provide by ordinance for the appointment of such officers as shall be necessary and proper to carry into full force and authority the power, capacity, jurisdiction, and duties of said city, which are or shall be vested therein, or in the council, or in the mayor, recorder, or any other officer or body of officers thereof, and to grant to the officers so appointed the power necessary or proper for the proper purposes above mentioned. The council by ordinance shall define the duties of all officers so appointed, and whereas the city administrator's duties and responsibilities shall include, but not be limited to, all duties and powers of treasurer as are described and set forth pursuant to Section 42 of the city's charter, and thus the position of city treasurer shall be deemed in all respects to be merged with the newly established position of city administrator, and whereas the city administrator shall be the administrative business manager of all of the city's governmental operations, including all municipal utility board operations, and shall supervise and manage all administrative activities and operations of the city pursuant to the direction and control of the mayor and city council, and whereas pursuant to Article 8, Paragraph 1 of Ordinance Number 318 of the City of Buckhannon, known and referred to as the city's Employees Administrative Ordinance, the City Council formally designated the City Recorder as the administrator of the Employees Administrative Ordinance, the City Recorder long having acted generally in the capacity as the city's Human Resource Manager, and whereas the City Council now desires to specifically amend both Ordinance Number 318 and the past practice of Buckhannon City government, and formally designate in all respects the City Administrator as the administrator of Ordinance Number 318, and further of all city ordinances involving the administration of employee benefits or other employee matters now in effect or hereafter to be effected, and to designate the City Administrator and not the City Recorder as the city's Human Resource Manager. Now therefore be it ordained and enacted by the Council of the City of Buckhannon as follows. And I'm not going to read you Article 1, but I would encourage everyone to familiarize yourself with these things. There are, I believe, 14 very specific items that are assigned as duties and powers, authority to the City Recorder. Some of those come right out of the Charter relative to what we have always required of the City Treasurer. Some of them come out of Ordinance 318 relative again to human resource management matters. Some of them come out from outside of either one of those, the Charter or Ordinance 318. But there's a comprehensive list of those things. It's almost a job description. And Article 2 provides for education, experience, residency, and other requirements for the city administrator. Just quickly going down the list. The first requirement is that the city administrator shall possess a bachelor's degree from an accredited university in business, finance, public administration, business management, or related field, with a master's degree being preferred. B, the city administrator shall possess extensive experience in public management, including responsibilities for operations, budgeting and finance, and human resource management and administration. C, the city administrator shall be bondable. D, the city administrator shall possess or be able to acquire and maintain at all times a valid state of West Virginia driver's license. And E, the city administrator shall, one, be a resident of Upshur County, West Virginia, or two, become a resident of Upshur County, West Virginia within 90 days of beginning employment as city administrator with the city of Buckhannon. As you can see in the effective date article 3, it would be my anticipation that you would take this up on first reading on July 19, the second reading, possible passage and adoption would be August 2, 30 days thereafter is September 1, and that would be the actual effectuation date of this ordinance, if it's to move forward. So that's one that we've been talking a little bit about here in recent weeks and months, so please take a peek at 366. Are there any questions about that before I roll into ordinance 367?
Dave, let me just make one comment in there, because city recorder comes up over and over and over again in there. You and I have had conversations, I've had conversations with other folks here, but I want to make it very clear that I do not see the role of city recorder in the long run as being the individual that should be in charge of human resources. I think maybe we didn't take enough time to think about that when that decision was made. But the city recorder is an elected position. And quite frankly, I would see some concern about having the elected, an individual that's elected to have complete, maybe not complete, but extensive control over human resource matters within the operation of the city. They could be misused. Hopefully they would never be, but it would be possible. And I think this is a good separation of duties between an elected official and human resource management. As a second point, I have absolutely no background in human resource and personnel management. I had the required course way back in college, and I remember nothing about it. And the law has changed tremendously since then. What used to have a human resource person in an organization now requires a good-sized staff and a lot of legal advice as well. So I think it's well taken that we remove the human resource duties from the office of city recorder. I have absolutely no objection to that move, and in fact encourage it.
I'll just follow up with Rich's comments. Now, this ordinance 318 that's referenced so many times in this 366 was enacted in the summer of 2005. And we got to think about what's going on from 1963 through 2009. There were two city recorders who, they were the full-time city employees here at City Hall. And it just became a practice where deference was done, that if somebody needed to figure out how many vacation days they had coming, or you know, whatever it was personnel related, it often became the just the implicit duty of the city recorder to do those things. And the city recorder from that period of roughly 63 to 2009 was also the city treasurer, whether it was Mrs. Poundstone or Mrs. Show. So now you have some new dynamics. You have Mr. Doss, who is well versed in all of these kinds of matters, both as treasurer as well as in the HRM area. This makes, in my opinion, perfect sense to evolve to this, and particularly since Mr. Clemens is not feeling jeopardized by having that duty removed. I told him his paycheck, as far as I know, wasn't going down, so he was all for that. But I think it's something that is good for the city.
It also makes sense to be in the hands of a full-time employee, not as a part-time employee.
Any other questions about 366 before I tease you with ordinance 367? 366, again, I think is subject to your comments and remarks, pretty close to final form. Ordinance 367 is about half-baked. And there are still some issues that I'm discussing with Mr. Clemens that I have a concern or two about, but let me just put it out there for you to think about. Ordinance number 367 of the City of Buckhannon, and Ordinance 1, amending Ordinance number 170 of the City of Buckhannon, that is Buckhannon's Housing Enforcement Ordinance. 2, adopting the statutory provisions of Chapter 8, Article 12, Section 16A of the West Virginia Code as amended, entitled Registration of Uninhabitable Property. And 3, adopting the statutory provisions of Chapter 8, Article 12, Section 16C of the West Virginia Code as amended, entitled Registration of Vacant Buildings, Registration Fees, Procedures for Administration and Enforcement. Whereas the provisions of Chapter 8, Article 12, Section 16 of the West Virginia Code as amended confer plenary power and authority upon municipalities, including the City of Buckhannon, to adopt ordinances regulating the repair, alteration, or improvement, or the vacating and closing, or removal or demolition, or any combination thereof, of any dwellings or other buildings unfit for human habitation due to dilapidation, defects increasing the hazard of fire, accidents or other calamities, lack of ventilation, lack of sanitary facilities, pardon my typo, or any other conditions prevailing in any dwelling or building, whether used for human habitation or not, which would cause such dwellings or other buildings to be unsafe, unsanitary, dangerous, or detrimental to the public safety or welfare. And whereas the Council of the City of Buckhannon adopted ordinance number 170, sometimes referred to as the City of Buckhannon's Housing Enforcement Ordinance, that was effectuated on July 15, 1974, and whereas the state legislature amended the immediately foregoing authorizing state statute in 2008, and whereas the state legislature further enacted, 1, the provisions of Chapter 8, Article 12, Section 16A, entitled Registration of Uninhabitable Property in 2008, and 2, the provisions of Chapter 8, Article 12, Section 16C, entitled Registration of Vacant Buildings, Registration Fees, Procedures for Administration and Enforcement in 2010, and whereas the Council of the City of Buckhannon is committed to becoming more vigilant respecting all matters involving dwellings or buildings determined to be unfit for human habitation, or alternatively, vacant buildings or other structures due to said dwellings, buildings, or other structures threatening the health, safety, and general welfare of the residents of the City of Buckhannon. Now therefore be it ordained and enacted by the Council of the City of Buckhannon as follows. And what will follow will be specific findings that will track the whereas paragraphs, and then an article that will lift out the relative portions of Chapter 8, Article 12, Section 16, 8.12.16a, 8.12.16c, and then all of these things that the legislature has done over the last 2 to 4 years that have greatly expanded the authority of the Housing Enforcement Board. That would be before you, and you would have in place the mechanism to require registration and to collect fees for dilapidated structures as well as vacant structures. Oftentimes, Mr. Clemens, in his role as zoning officer, will come into a property that's in a state. An elderly person has passed on. They have 3 kids, the closest of which lives in Peoria. And he always has these issues with repetitively, especially in the summer, with getting the closest person, the heir, to be attentive to the watching for the property. This state statute, particularly relative to 8.12.16c, part of the registration requirement, in addition to the collection of fees, requires that these out-of-state people designate a West Virginia resident, someone that's more reachable, to be the agent for the city to communicate with relative to issues with the property. Not just cutting the grass, but if we notice as a result of last Friday's storm that the roof blows off of somebody's house and they might not be due to come into Buckhannon for 6 months, we have that contact person that's more locally oriented to make them aware of problems with that structure. So again, there's still some work to come relative to Ordinance 367. One other issue that Rich and I were discussing just a little while ago, there's a requirement in 812.16 now that references the specific adoption of a building code by the municipal corporation. The city of Buckhannon did that back in 1988 with Ordinance 244. And specifically, at that time, we adopted the various BOCA codes. Some of you may be familiar with that now somewhat antiquated term because the BOCA codes were merged into something else that Mr. Clemens knows the name of. Yes, there you have it. But we have not specifically in any ordinance referenced the name of the new code. So I think this is an opportunity to do a little cleanup relative to Ordinance 244 too, to sort of strike out that language relative to BOCA, because a lot of contractors might come and say, well, what's the building code in Buckhannon? Oh, the BOCA code. Well, it hasn't been a BOCA code in 10 years or whatever it is. So I think that's another area that we can bring things up to speed and make our ordinances more enforceable. I think that's been one of those concerns that's been highlighted with some of the recent problems with one property in particular. I don't want to give the mayor a headache by starting to discuss it, but yeah, this should make us more able to manage those kinds of issues in the future. So please take a peek at that one as well. And if you have any thoughts for what should be included in it, it's still in a draft stage. It'll be easy to add things on. The only other thing I had on my list was to welcome Mr. Q to City Council. Hope you have a fun and
it's going to be a blast
experience.
Yeah.
Yes. That's all I have unless you have questions for me.
I have a question.
Go.
Would this ordinance 367 tend to alleviate the problems that Mr. Moore up on Barber Street came in a couple of weeks ago and talked to the council about some property that is already being lived in, but is definitely, as we can tell, looks uninhabitable, but is, as he put it, respectfully put it, when did you move the city dump to Barber Street?
In short answer to your question, the initial onus, the responsibility would be upon the city housing enforcement officer to make a list of the properties that would fall into that classification of being uninhabitable. And you know, I'm certainly not going to represent to you or anybody else tonight that that particular structure is uninhabitable. It might be,
but that's a
that would be
what this is
a process. That's correct. There would be a
Okay.
process involved with that. And then that matter would come before the Housing Enforcement Board. That's the first, that's the second level. Housing Enforcement Officer, Housing Enforcement Board. Under the state statute, the Housing Enforcement Board would make a decision relative to either thumbs up or thumbs downing the habitability of that particular structure. There are mechanisms in the state statute that allows the property owner to then appeal that beyond the Housing Enforcement Board to the circuit court if they so choose. And there's different waiting periods. There's a 45-day waiting period from the date that the housing enforcement officer finds that the property is uninhabitable in order to go before the full Housing Enforcement Board. Then if you don't like that decision, there's a 90-day hold that allows the person to file their appeal with the circuit court. So one of the frustrations that I see with this ordinance, if somebody reports to the housing enforcement officer that, gee, we think this is one of those places that nobody should be living in. It seems to me to be uninhabitable. Complaints made. A housing enforcement officer goes out in a matter of probably a few days after that complaint is received, prepares a report, makes a determination, level 1, as to whether it's uninhabitable or not, sends that by certified mail to the folks, they get it, they have 45 days to respond. That's 6, 7 weeks, 7 weeks, 7.5 weeks, whatever it is. And they can say, no, we don't agree with that. We want it to go before the full Housing Enforcement Board. And there's a hearing scheduled. You got to give them at least 20 days notice of the hearing, so it's 45 plus 20. And now they still don't like the decision because the Housing Enforcement Board may uphold the housing enforcement officer's position. Then those folks have, if they say, we're going to file an appeal, we're giving you notice right now, we're going to appeal this to the circuit court, everything is on hold for an additional 90 days. 45 days, 20 days, 90 days. I would love to be able to tell you all that this is something that you can do and you send one letter and the next week the problem is corrected. The deck is stacked in favor of the due process rights of those folks who stand to lose their property. So,
Well, are there guidelines to help the housing officer determine what uninhabitable is?
there are some things in the state statute that help a little bit, but they are, generally speaking, vague.
The code does provide a list of items. There's a relatively small booklet of what is required. Means of egress, electrical, lighting, ventilation, size of windows, height, windows in the bedroom, fan in the bathroom, all these kinds of regulations. But you need to understand that, to me, and maybe this needs to be addressed in the ordinance, there is a significant difference between someone who complains about a piece of property for which they don't own, they're only renting, and a complaint from a person now who's in fact charged of the owner of that particular piece of property. And by far, I have had very good success, I think, with handling property that's rental. I have had extremely poor success in handling property that is in fact owned by the people living in it, because they choose to live that way.
There's also reference in the state statute that we're talking about to a state fire marshal's report that can be generated. So oftentimes what Rich does in his capacity as housing enforcement officer is works with our fire chief, who works with the state fire marshal's office to try to facilitate these things.
Would the evidence that Department of Health or somebody will not allow a person to move back into the property until it's taken care of and improved, would that have any?
There are provisions in this statute that allows the person who has been found to have an uninhabitable structure to reapply and ask for a re-inspection, which they're entitled after they believe they have brought the property up to speed so that it is habitable. The next stage would involve a re-inspection by the housing enforcement officer.
I bet there's nothing that says what the size of the vermin escaping from it could be, though, is there?
Nothing that specific.
Any other questions for David? Consent agenda, approval of minutes, approval of building wiring permits, payment of bills, budget adjustment, coal severance, approval of pet door rescue, March of Dimes event, and consulting agreement with J&H. I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda and ask for a roll call vote, because a roll call vote is required on E.4.
What's E.4?
It's the budget adjustment on the coal severance tax. We had an additional $38,000. It all goes to street paving. It's coal severance. Motion to approve consent agenda.
So moved.
And a second? Motion made and seconded. Rich, will you call the roll, please?
Dave Thomas?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
John Waltz?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Ron?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Mayor?
I'll vote yes, even though I don't have to.
Vote is unanimous.
Resolution passes. Strategic issue G1. You have a request in there, I think, about making
Actually, let me clarify an issue that came up.
there you go. Yeah.
The invoice that's, you find it in your packet, it's, anyhow, request for $500. There was a misunderstanding at the last meeting regarding the direction of this request. This is not a request to be funded by City Council. It was a request of the Lewis County or the Region E Tobacco Prevention Program, which I understand is housed in Lewis County, to grant the city of Buckhannon $500 for the use of Create Buckhannon and other organizations to help with the signage and prevention of smoking and tobacco use. So it's maybe a little misunderstood from last time, but it's back in there for your review. But the intent here, I think, is whether or not we are interested in developing or having our city attorney develop an ordinance that would mark all city parks and recreation facilities as tobacco-free within the city. That's not too dissimilar, I believe, from that requirement of Board of Education for all their properties. Might be a good place to start, but that's really the request here, as to whether or not we want to have tobacco-free zone. It has nothing to do with the $500.
But, Rich, are they going to give us $500?
It's been requested. So
I
whether
mean, they're giving the city $500.
Right. That's been the request. So.
Because it sounded like we were.
Right. It was not a request of us. Right. It was a request on our behalf of this tobacco coalition group.
So we will consider the issue of declaring our parks to be tobacco-free at next council meeting. That's it. Everybody get a chance to chew on that? Okay. Bad term. Or smoke on it. Yeah, it was bad. E2 is approval of Buckhannon National Guard Army Conference Center agreement. You have there in your packet in the next page, if you found this back of thing, a letter which Dave prepared with a little bit of urging from me and a little consultation that we sent to the Guard. The essence of it is that, and I went ahead and signed it because I know you all signed on to this, and we were pushing a deadline. But essentially, we say that we'll put off the annexation out there until after the first phase is contracted, because the imposition of B&O tax on that was going to cause them to have to redesign and rebid, and maybe put the project back 6 months or a year, or maybe the funds being reallocated somewhere else in the state. So we took this action. So we commit to that. And second, we commit that the water board will continue on the water line. And third, we commit that we will provide a sum of $400,000 to the Armory folks on or about May 31st of 2013. And that's the essence of the letter. It's been out there. So I would ask for your official approval of this letter. Motion to approve the letter, please.
So moved.
There's a second. Second. Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
I have a comment.
Yep.
The $400,000 toward the construction of the conference center.
That's correct.
That's the one thing I question, that I felt like the whole county, people of the whole county should contribute to, because it's going to be used by the whole county.
Yeah, it'll be used by the county and beyond, we hope.
Right.
But I think we had that discussion here. I recall saying to a large group of people in this room that we might spend as much as $750,000 and maybe more. And I remember asking the question right here, is there anybody in this room who's opposed to us doing this? And there wasn't any. And the county commission has been paying they started out about $60,000 a year in interest on a $1.4 million loan. That because of some change in the interest rate, I think is down to 30 something. And but they continue to pay that, so they're making their contribution. The Development Authority is on the hook for the $1.4 million, and you know, I think that this is a community effort, Pam, and that I think we're picking up. And I think I said it here before. It's our turn. It's the city of Buckhannon's turn to step up to the plate and make some contribution to this. And the $400,000 is not the total amount that's going to be paid out on this, but it's the amount that we have to deliver to the Guard by May of next year. And so the rest of this is coming, but I think I was pretty clear, and I think we've always been pretty clear that we could be into this for as much as $750,000 before it's up.
And at some point in time, Kenny, Michael Doss will bring together a plan of action for how we're going to be funding.
Right, and I think he made some suggestions in a kind of preliminary report to us a couple meetings ago, and everybody will be kept abreast of this. But this is a commitment we needed to make to the Guard so that they could proceed on their schedule. And JU reported that their construction design going to bid, they told us last time we talked to them on the teleconference that they were expecting to bid sometime in July.
My understanding was they were expecting to have plans available for, you know, review and bid. So to go out, then there's probably going to be a month advertising period.
Yeah.
Makes it the end of August, and then a bid opening. You know, then you got to certify and do up. I mean, so late fall, you know, September, October.
But did you understand, as I did, that if we held them up here, that the whole process would have to be redesigned and start from ground zero?
They account for, you know, certain fees.
Yeah. So these are the commitments we need to make.
Well, I think it's also important to remind the public that the National Guard is paying for 50% of the conference center, and that we're paying for the other 50%. And that with a flat yield curve that we have today, you know, you can get a 10 or 20-year long-term loan at a very, very reasonable rate. And Michael's working on that.
Yeah, Michael's looking at it, and we'll get more information as this progresses. We're just committing $400,000 by May 31st. There will be more to follow. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. You have in your packet, I think it's the last part of your packet, the appointments for...
Point of order, you haven't voted yet.
Didn't vote?
No, sir.
All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out to me. We've been here next week trying to figure out what we're doing. You have the last few pages of your handout of your book there are the appointments, and would entertain a motion to approve the appointments as listed for 2012-2013.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and second.
I have a question.
For discussion.
Being new, all the people that work for the appointments in the first part here that are employees of the city of Buckhannon, these appointments are made for a period of 1 year.
That's correct.
Is there a contingency there if any of these people do not perform their duties as such that they can be removed at any time during the year? They serve at our will and pleasure?
We are at-will employees.
Okay.
Yes, they can be removed at any time.
Okay.
Mayor, I'm going to recuse myself from voting.
Okay.
And I would request at the end of the meeting to have a very brief executive session.
Okay. I have a motion made and seconded. All in favor of the appointments signify so saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. That brings us to comments and announcements. Michael's not going to talk. Dave Thomas.
I just want to thank everybody that, I think Scott said it appropriately when he talked about the one email that he referred to, that we have a lot of people that really went the extra mile this last week. And I think, I know Mon Power's been criticized to some degree, but this was a really catastrophic storm of really unbelievable proportions. It started in Iowa and went all the way to southern New Jersey and so forth. So I feel terrible for those people that don't have power support. But be good neighbors, and if you can help somebody be cool, ask them into your home and so forth. And I just want to thank all the different volunteers and the city employees that really pulled together in Mon Power. And as I indicated, I would like to go into a brief executive session.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank everybody for being a good neighbor also in this situation. And I did want to ask one thing about where we're having, you don't have to pay a tipping fee, I believe, if you bring stuff that was...
As long as you are a City of Buckhannon waste collection customer. If you have a city address, of course, you're automatically billed for waste collection. Or bring a copy of your waste collection bill if you live in the county. And we will waive the fees at the transfer station for anything that is storm-related, that was refrigerated, frozen, whatever, ma'am. We are also picking that up on our collection routes and have been all week. Most of the days this week have been 11, 12 hours for the guys on the trucks. And they really had to work at it this week, as well as the street department picking up brush. So, but yes, we're taking that stuff to the transfer station and not charging a tipping fee.
But that should pass this week.
Exactly.
Because your regular collections will be getting it then.
That's hopefully. And one other thing, I forgot to check the noise ordinance that we are going to pass. I've already had people starting to complain about the generators. And is that in that ordinance? I mean...
Covered under emergency situation.
I understand that, but I understand
yeah,
that.
That's in the ordinance.
Okay, because I didn't have a chance to
Positive.
go over it.
Yeah, the noise ordinance is passed. It goes into effect.
Not in effect.
Goes into effect
July 21st.
July 21st.
Okay, that's all.
John?
Just to be able to echo those statements as well. It's one of those times you feel very lucky to live in the place you live. Tough times bring out the best in people and the worst in people sometimes, and there aren't the best in people here. I wanted to welcome Ron also here, and the next time we have one of these meetings I won't be here because it'll be part of a production Buckhannon Community Theater's doing of The Secret Garden. You'll see signs and tickets and stuff for that. I think the city does a good job putting up good productions and things, and it's really talented young people in this, and if nothing else, come to see that because it's very, very good.
Rich?
A couple of items. Welcome Ron to the fold. I think you'll enjoy the process. Michael did send me a email that he wanted a couple of things mentioned this evening, and just pass them along. One is he has received the renewal for the Brick Street workers' compensation bill. The total is $149,585, which is $2,737 less than last year. So good direction, not a major amount. He will have the end of the year unaudited treasury report at the next meeting in July. And he also reminds the Finance Committee that there is a meeting at 10 a.m. on July 9th, that's next Monday, at City Hall. So that's all I have.
John?
Well, so far it's been enjoyable. Has everybody in the council got electricity, got power? Good, because at county commission meeting this morning, none of the commissioners had power,
Willie Parker did have power, so they decided that Willie Parker has all the power on the county commission.
I've heard that before.
I would like to also say thank you to the firemen and to the police officers who patrolled downtown and kept us safe during the darkness. I certainly had some ideas of what could go wrong in the alleys down here and everything, and I think they took care of that rather well. Mon Power, 1:30 in the morning on Monday morning, talking to an employee of Mon Power in front of our house who was checking out one of the trees that were supposedly on fire. Not supposedly, it was on fire, but didn't burn a lot. But he said that they did everything they could in this area with only 8 employees working.
This whole county.
God bless them. You know, they did a tremendous job with only 8 employees for those first 48, 50 some hours that they were out there. And I'd like to kudos out to them and to all the other volunteers, and we certainly appreciate what they're doing.
Scott?
Welcome, Ron. And that's it.
I'd like to say some things about this incident, the emergency that we had, and I too appreciate what the street department did, police and fire, but let's don't forget about our water system. And if there's a top priority in one of those situations, it's got to be the people get safe drinking water. And we ran out. Some of the one of the PSDs actually went 0, but throughout the weekend, Tom Landis had people out doing what we had to do. We have emergency standby generator at the water treatment plant that is big enough to run the plant, and it gets exercised on a regular basis, so we know that when we throw the switch it'll run and go. And it has about a 4-day fuel supply on it, and so we were running, and regardless of the rumors that went around, we never had one anxious moment as to whether we could provide water or not. We had to get some generators to pump to the PSDs. Tom chased all the way to Pennsylvania, spent half the night getting a generator, and got it in here and got it going to supply the PSDs with pumped water. And you can't say too much, maybe not enough even for their services as well. And you know, people make fun of the emergency services folks, but let me tell you, I was in that operations center several times over the past few days, and there were people in there doing everything they could possibly do, and some of them went 12, 20 hours without any sleep, and so it's you know, we live in a great community. I'm sorry for the folks who ran out of water. I'm sorry for the folks who still don't have power, but we really did have a good show. And one of the things that happens in a case of emergency, we can exercise and exercise and exercise. When we have a situation, we really do start finding the weak links, and notes are being taken, and we're getting ourselves ready for hopefully never the next one, but we'll be ready when and if it comes. It'll be in better shape. Do appreciate everybody's effort. That said, I would entertain a motion that Councilman Thomas requests to enter into an executive session as per 698-4 for personnel.
Yes.
So personnel.
So moved.
Motion made by Dave. Second. Second by Pam. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed no.